Welcome to Diary of an Unemployed Actor with me, Milo Dennison. Each week, I speak with up-and-coming actors, actresses, and filmmakers about the entertainment industry. We discuss success, failure, and share a few tips to inspire those of you who have a passion for the creative art. This week, I'm speaking with Caitlyn Piccirillo, a New York-based actress with a ton of experience. We discuss the value of theater training and finding the characters you're playing to make it yours while being true to the writer's vision. She has a great interpretation of how she played Dorothy in a production of A Wizard of Oz that is certainly worth listening to. She also is a freelance makeup artist, and we talk about the fun that goes along with creating monsters out of prosthetics and makeup, and a little bit of what got her into that side gig as a makeup artist. And we get into a really interesting discussion about the auditioning experience for musical theater in New York. And this is definitely if you are an actor or actress living in New York or moving to New York or thinking about moving to New York, you absolutely should listen to this because it is an interesting process. And I know other cities in the U.S. have similar processes as well. I believe Seattle's very similar. And I'm not sure beyond those two, but it is interesting and certainly worth listening to. One final note, you might hear a little bit of music playing in the background. Caitlyn's neighbors are musicians, and it sounds like they're in some kind of a brass band or horned instrument band. It's really quiet in the background. Occasionally you can hear it at the beginning and a couple points throughout, but it's not distracting in any way. But just kind of give you a heads up in case you're listening and being like, what is that? Is that music in the background? Yes, it is music in the background. All right, enjoy. On the 80s and 90s Uncensored, listen to card-carrying Gen Xers, Milo and Jamie, as we banter, debate, and discuss various topics about the 80s and 90s.
If you're a miserable middle-aged office worker and your life sucks and essentially you don't have anything to look forward to, at least one day a week you have the 80s and 90s Uncensored.
We try to decide if Magnum and MacGyver were in a cage match, who would walk out.
We discuss if the problems between the left and the right can be attributed to those who watched Saved by the Bell and those who didn't.
We have the ultimate smackdown between Voyager versus Deep Space Nine.
And a lot of talk about movies and music from the era.
So flashback with us by subscribing on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast to enjoy a new episode of the 80s and 90s Uncensored every Monday. Is there much, are all the theaters closed down there as well?
Oh, yeah. They've been, they shut down Broadway on March 13th, I believe. And there hasn't been any live theater in New York City, as far as I know. Maybe there's been some, like, socially distanced out in the park performances. With small theater companies just trying to keep busy. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, most of the theater being done in New York City right now seems to be via Zoom or now that filming is happening again. So like TV productions coming back. The show that we just started rehearsing for, the dining room. We're rehearsing over Zoom, and then we'll be recording it over like the course of 3 days in someone's apartment.
Oh, interesting. How do you find that then in regards to rehearsing over Zoom versus in person? Because you're not getting as much instant feedback in that experience of just being right next to the person.
Yeah, it's a little weird just because everyone has technical issues. My internet sometimes is a little bit sporadic. And this production, my friend's directing it, but he casts instead of doing the way you traditionally would do the dining room, which is with 6 people, every character is played by a different person. So there's 50 something people in this cast. So it's really hard to just have that one-on-one moment with your scene partner. But when I've done Zoom readings and stuff, it's not that bad. As long as people are really trying to stay in the moment and kind of committing to what they're doing. There's been some beautiful theater being done over Zoom.
Interesting. Yeah, I know a lot. Some is being, and it's the same here. Some theaters are broadcasting over Zoom and stuff. I haven't really watched anything. Maybe I should give it a try though, because I definitely know people that are doing it. And theaters need to stay afloat is the thing. Like, how are they? I mean, they're not earning any money right now. And so, what else are they supposed to do? They had a scheme here that's, I don't remember, one of the politicians proposed was basically just like if all the actors and stuff are complaining about not having work right now, they should just go back and retrain and do something else, was kind of attitude.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, geez. And it's
God.
Seriously, how much money is generated for the city of London from the theaters first of all, and then just what a ridiculous thing to say.
Exactly. So much. And I don't, that's something I found even talking within, with my family who are not art people, they're science people. Mm-hmm. And they really don't get it. They really do think that performing is like a glorified hobby rather than something that you really work and train for however many years. I not only have my bachelor's in acting, but I also have my master's in theater. I couldn't even tell you how much time and money on acting classes and voice lessons and dance lessons, and to out of nowhere have your entire industry disappear. It would be like out of nowhere having the entire publishing industry and disappear. Sure, books are like a commercial item, but you would very much notice if out of nowhere no one was writing, publishing, reading books anymore.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting. I wanted to ask you about that too, because you have a ton of training, which is amazing. So what is kind of the value you get out of doing so much training? Because a lot of Hollywood actors, you could look and say, well, they didn't have any, actual acting training. But I think there's a value in it. And I'd love to hear kind of your take on it, because like you said, you not just got your bachelor's, you got a master's in theater.
Well, my master's was primarily in theater history because I have a real interest in dramaturgy. And in London, they actually really have an appreciation for dramaturgy, which I love. But in the US, it's kind of a dying art. But I think it's super important for performers to have at least some idea of that, of doing that kind of research, because I find that I can always tell when a performer has done their homework.
And that's homework on the character? Homework
on the character, but it's not just what are my motivations? Who am I talking to? What is my background? But it's the minutia of it. Things like, okay, well, what is my socioeconomic background? What does that mean for how I was raised? And because someone who was raised in upper middle class lifestyle versus someone who was poverty stricken as a child is going to have different reactions to different situations in a show, or talking about, well, what era was it and what was going on in that time frame? Mm-hmm. A story about two women in love is totally going to have a different feeling and context if the story's set in the 1960s versus the 1860s. So I think those things are really important to have in your back pocket to be able to go and do your work. Because also these playwrights were writing in a very specific time. So knowing what was going on in the theater, what was going on for the playwrights themselves, what was going on in society, it makes a very well-informed performance. The experience I had most where it really clicked for me was right after I graduated college. Zachary Quinto, was in Tennessee Williams' Glass Menagerie. Mm-hmm.
And sorry, for anyone listening, Zachary Quinto is Spock in the new Star Trek movies. He played the evil guy in, I can't remember the name of the TV series. Heroes, that's right. Yeah, played the bad guy in Heroes. Okay, sorry, keep going. Mm-hmm.
No problem. I really enjoy his work. And I went to see the show because I love Glass Menagerie and I love Zachary Quinto. Mm-hmm. And in the playbill, there happened to be an interview with him about the work he had done on doing research for the character. This doesn't happen all the time in the playbill program. It's just was a bit like a kismet. And he was talking about how Glass Menagerie is very much seen as an autobiographical play about Tennessee Williams' life. So he really delved into Tennessee Williams' biography and how he felt about his own, how Williams felt about his own mother and sister who he left behind when he decided to go off and become a playwright, and how it is very much about the gay experience of that time. And I had, everyone's seen Glass Menagerie in every different which way, but it was the most truthful portrayal of Tom I'd ever seen, because it was so well developed around what the story really was.
That's interesting, because you think about it on one level, it's dialogue, it's written dialogue. And then so you're constrained to the words, and how you then make it your own and add depth to it is by your interpretation of that and your delivery of that, and the physicality of it in regards to the performance as well. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And back to the point was the studies around that help teach you the skills to learn that and to kind of what to look for in it.
Yeah, 100%.
You did Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
I did.
So yeah, how did you incorporate that kind of a mindset and that training into that character?
Oh, for sure. So I was doing Wizard of Oz with this touring educational theater group on Long Island, where I'm from. And I was really curious about some of the things that were said in the script because it's, everyone knows The Wizard of Oz. Everyone's seen the movie about 100 times. And it's really easy to just kind of fall into recreating that same feeling of the film. But, when you're an actor, you kind of want to play and want to see how you can make it your own. And there was one line that really always stuck with me of when she, at the very end, she says, "I'll miss you most of all," to the Scarecrow. And that seems just so random because in the movie, she spent the same amount of time pretty much with all of them. And so I did some research and I was looking, and somewhere in the depths of the internet, someone had suggested that in an early draft of the script, each of the friends, the Scarecrow, Lion, and Tin Man, were, as we know, kind of connected to these different farmhands, which we know because they're played by the same actors in the film. But originally, the Scarecrow was supposed to be a bit younger and possibly like her boyfriend who was supposedly going off to university, which is why he needed a brain, because he was leaving to go get an education. And so there was I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting if you put a little bit of a romantic intent under this. Nothing extreme, because this is a children's production. But what would happen if there was just this love between them in some way? So throughout the production, I would always make sure to either be holding his hand or sitting very close to him, or protecting one another if the other was in danger. And I had run this past my scene partner who was playing the Scarecrow. And I remember on my very last day performing for this tour, we were in this auditorium full of little kids, like maybe 6 to 10-year-olds, auditorium full of them. And at the very end of the play, when I give Scarecrow a big hug and I say, "I'm going to miss you most of all, Scarecrow," every child in that auditorium went, "Ew," which, is the kid equivalent of seeing an adult kiss.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, they got it. These children understood what I was going for. And I was so proud of it.
That's fantastic. I love that take on it too, because that subtlety of the closeness, the physical closeness that you created with him on the stage in the hands, to where the children picked up on that without realizing it, is absolutely a brilliant take on it. And it's interesting too, because that line on its own, when you see it in the movie, it doesn't really register why she's missing him so much. But when you take that interpretation, it does absolutely make sense. why she would say that.
Yeah, I love it. And it was several years ago now, but it's my favorite performance memory.
That's beautiful. That's lovely. Yeah. It's stuff like that's part of what makes being, I think, a stage actor fantastic, is hearing that from the audience, because you're not going to hear that in a movie or anything like that. So you've done stage combat, you've done dance, you've done all this other stuff. Is there anything you have yet to learn that you want to learn?
Anything I've yet to learn that I want to learn? As I have touched, I've done almost everything. Honestly, if the things I want to learn are a little bit more specialized, because yes, I've taken generalized dance, ballet and jazz, everyone has taken that. And I've taken generalized stage makeup or generalized puppetry. But I really would love to learn how to do handed rod puppetry, which is the like Sesame Street puppets, because they are very different than the kind of puppets I've worked with in the past. I'd really love to learn tap dancing. I have a really hard time with my left and my right, and that is one of those things that you cannot have a problem with when you're tap dancing. And I've been looking into it. It's really hard to find in New York City, but I really want to learn how to do really advanced prosthetic makeup, like movie monster kind of level, scary makeup. Because I can do, your basic like cuts and gore, but I want to learn how to like make someone look like their flesh is melting off. I don't know. It's so gross, but.
Well, you freelance as a makeup artist as well. So is that on film, stage?
It's primarily on film. The majority of it I've done has been with friends' projects. I had a friend who was writing a web series called I Killed Batman, which was based on his play of the same name, which is really fun. It's taking this kind of like original character and throwing him into the Bat universe. And so for that web series, I was getting to build not only some of the side pieces of the characters. One was like a pair of gloves with really long, gnarly nails, or just doing basic cuts and bruises on the guy, like the minions who got beat up by Batman the night before. But also things like I built a whole trachea out of clay and liquid latex. So Bane could rip it out of someone's throat, which was an experience doing that kind of image research to try to figure out what a trachea outside of a human body would look like.
Yeah, totally.
So that same friend is writing a horror film, or rather has written a horror film, and it's going into production in the spring of 2021. And so we are working, I'm doing the makeup on that, which I'm really excited for. It's more normal gore for this project, but it's going to be more professional looking. We're using better quality materials because in the past, like I said, it was kind of whatever I could find around my house to make these things. I think one of the minions in the I Kill Batman had a scar made out of a Dunkin' Donuts napkin and Elmer's glue. All right. So I'm excited to be working with better quality makeup and to see what kind of horror I can make with it.
What got you into doing that?
I don't know. I want to say sophomore or junior year of college at Adelphi University, we had a required class, which was stage makeup. And, we had to do old age makeup and corrective makeup and that high fashion, like French, like white face with the beauty mark makeup. The name is kind of restoration makeup. And I wasn't great at it. It was not my forte. But then we came to the cuts and bruises and the zombie makeups and things like that. And that I really excelled at. That one was easier. And so it just, I just really enjoyed doing it. And then on my own time, I just started doing that kind of stuff for fun. Halloween became a real treat to try to figure out how could I mix sexy and scary. I think I remember Yeah, one year, if you're familiar with American Horror Story, I was Moira from
Zachary
the first
Quintos,
season.
speaking of, because he was in the
More
first
Zachary
season.
Quinto, yeah, exactly. And so Moira is the maid who appears elderly at sometimes and young in the other. And spoilers for the first season of American Horror Story, I guess. But she died by getting shot in the eye. And so at some point you do see her, beautiful and young, but with like this missing eye. And that was my Halloween costume one year, was that I, wore this tiny maid costume, but then had like done like a gouged out eye look. So that was fun. And I just kept doing it over time and getting better and practicing. And then this past October, I did 31 days of horror makeup, which was great. So many people really loved what was being made. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe this isn't something that could just be a hobby. Maybe I could freelance doing more of this beyond when my friends ask me to do it.
That's great. So for 31 days, every day you did a different type of horror makeup?
Some of it was not necessarily horror. It was like a Halloween costume makeup. Okay. So like one day I was like an impressionist painting. One day I was Harley Quinn. It pretty much got harder and harder as the time went on. I did a full Venetian mask painted on my face.
Wow.
I did, the final day was a zombie with, like full prosthetics across my mouth and like fake teeth and gross gore that I could create myself.
Which one took the longest to do?
Well, besides the zombie, because you need to really let all those glues dry, and they take way longer than you would think.
Okay.
But actually, I think the Venetian mask took the longest because it was so precise, and I had to mix use different pigments and mixing mediums to get the paint consistency, and I was gluing like pearls around my entire face.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that one took like 3 hours.
Oh, geez. Yeah, it's funny with makeup how sometimes you don't realize how long that type of stuff takes. I many years ago, I did a short film. It was like a short silent film, and it was a take on Nosferatu. And so the main actor, we had to do Nosferatu, to kind of try to make him look like that with the prosthetic nose and stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't know, a couple hours. That's probably plenty enough time to get that done. And oh yeah, it was funny. So like everything got pushed back so late because I didn't bother to learn and figure out how much time it would take the makeup artist to do the makeup for this character. And it looked great once it was done, but it was funny how far back that pushed everything because I didn't take that into consideration.
Yeah, you're not the first, nor will you be the last person to make that error in judgment, because that was actually one of the things with I Killed Batman was it did feel like the day tended to get pushed back a little farther because there wasn't enough time to do all of the makeup that had to be done, to the point where I think at some point I was like, you really need to just schedule like an extra hour more than you think you need, because these things take longer to dry. But actually, surprisingly, there was one look that I thought was going to take way longer than it did, and it ended up taking like half an hour. And it was like a wooden dummy, which I thought would have taken so long, but it ended up being really quick. I guess mainly because I didn't like glue down my eyebrows, and I just painted on my bare skin with paint instead of doing the whole prep that you need.
Were these did you post these online or something? Is that what it was?
I did. I posted them on my Instagram, and I've been bad because of the holidays, but I do have intents on making like a portfolio website. I have the Weebly ready. I just haven't uploaded any of the photos to it.
I always think it's a good idea for people that are actors and actresses to have something on the side as well, because the work is so sporadic. And so if there's something else you can do, that kind of helps sometimes. And something like this is great because it's still in the same field and it's something that you enjoy doing, which is cool.
Yeah, I think that's something I've really striven towards, is any survival work or any other work outside of acting. I really try to make sure it's in something that I would be comfortable doing for a long time that wouldn't drive me absolutely crazy, because that's where my passion lies, is in the theater. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have gone to get 2 degrees and all that.
Yeah, really.
So I really do try to stick in the theater with whatever I end up doing. So pre-COVID, my main money-making jobs were bartending in the various Broadway theaters, which was great because I got to see a Broadway show every night, or hear it at least, and interact with the cast and the stagehands and kind of just be in that energy every day. And if I wasn't there, I was working at Manhattan School of Music as a the stagehand, the stage manager. Uh-huh. And that was really great because, yet again, I was around musicians and around students because I clearly love college. But also sometimes those stagehand jobs were like carpentry jobs. And so I would be working with union carpenters building sets, and just getting to learn from them was great. Hear some of their experience. Some of them worked on like SNL building sets and things.
Oh, cool.
So getting to, absorb as much as you can from every experience you have is so important to me, and, better than any desk job that I could really imagine.
Agree. Yeah, totally agree. I wanted to ask you one more question about musicals versus non-musicals, because you're in New York, which is kind of a big musical city. Is there more opportunity for actors if they're singers?
Yes. There are plays, but it doesn't seem like there's as many, because here is not just whatever's being produced in New York City, but this during audition seasons, they are auditioning for everywhere, cruise lines and that little dinner theater in Wisconsin or whatever. They all come here to audition the actors. And so even like most smaller theaters, their big money making things are the musicals. So there's a lot more musical theater stuff going on here. With non-musical plays, the few auditions that really exist, as far as I've seen, it's mostly either Shakespeare, which is great. I love Shakespeare, but there's it's harder to get cast in that unless you have a dearth of
Shakespearean background with you.
Shakespeareans, as some of my friends would call it. Nice. And then there's other companies. The few that I've been able to get seen for as a non-union person has been the Signature Theater on 10th and 42nd, I believe. Usually I have better luck when I physically go, if I audition somewhere where I'm in the actual theater. The auditions where they're in actual Midtown, where all the other theater audition spaces are, it's a little harder. So Signature Theater and Irish Rep are really great places to get seen for non-musical plays.
I see. So with the Central, because I remember in Seattle, it was like this too, where they did like you mentioned, seasonal casting, and they kind of get people in. So is that similar in New York then, where you kind of get up and audition, and you're basically auditioning for multiple things at the same time? Or I'm I don't think I'm explaining it correctly, but
kind of.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, so usually what it will be is there's like a season audition for one theater company. And so they'll have like 5 plays, musicals in their season, and you have to go in with 16 bars, like 30 to 45 seconds of music, and try to convince them to bring you back for one of the 5.
Wow.
Or all of the 5, which is a bit of a challenge. And on top of that, I mean, hopefully it changes with COVID, but the audition process for non-union actors in New York City is so hard. Because there's so many of us. So if you're in the union, you have the benefit of a week in advance being able to sign up for a time to come back and audition for their equity principal auditions, EPAs. And so those, what time you're coming, you can be super prepared for 11 a.m. or 3 p.m., whatever time. Non-union auditions do not work that way. For the most part, the producers don't set up some sort of online sign up. It is first come, first serve. So people show up at 4 a.m. at these audition spots and make a list. And sometimes people will stay from the time they sign up in the morning until they finally open. Maybe they'll go home, but in the past, lists have been torn down or started over. So someone has to watch the list.
Oh, wow.
And what's really, really rough about that is the big audition season is in like January through March, when it's super cold at 4 a.m. So not only are you expected to be prepared, and there's usually at least more than one audition going on that day. There might be 3 to 7. So not only do you have to be super prepared for every single audition that you're hoping to get seen at, but you have to be vocally, physically, emotionally prepared to go in and be judged in front of all these people, sitting outside in the cold however many hours, and then sitting in a waiting room for however many hours, because if you're, on the list after number 100, you're not going to get seen probably until after lunch. And then sometimes they do this really, really mean thing where they realize that they have too many people, that they're never going to be able to get through everyone with 16 bars. So then they'll cut it 8 bars of music, which is like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is really hard because at that point, you're not being able to tell like a full, beginning, middle, end story. It's really just showing off what your voice sounds like and hope that they will call you back. Boy,
that sounds brutal.
It is. And so my go-tos, because I'm most comfortable in those situations as a very high soprano. So in those situations, I usually stick with like, I Could Have Danced All Night, or the very end of Think of Me from Phantom, because those are things that you show off a lot of range in a very short amount of time.
You mentioned that you have to be a member of the union for a lot of stuff. What are the requirements for that in New York? I'm not sure.
That's a good question. It's hard. I'm not 100% on it because obviously I am not a member yet. But as far as I understand, there are like 2 main ways to get into the union. And I'm sure someone who is in the union could definitely correct me on this. But as far as I understand, there is you get an equity contract, like a full equity contract, and then you're in the union. Usually the people I know who've done this are from smaller towns that have equity theaters in their town. As far as I understand it, is there's sometimes you can get very lucky and get cast in a show where you automatically get your card. Those are the things like...
If it's an equity theater.
If it's an equity theater, most of the people that I know who this happened to are from smaller markets like Boston, Philly, the Texas area, where they have equity theaters there, but maybe there's fewer actors available to them, and it's easier for those companies to hire local actors so they don't have to pay for housing. And so then those people can get cast in larger roles and get offered equity contracts. There's the other avenue, which I know more people do, which is the EMC track, which is Equity Membership Candidate. And what it is you work in an equity theater for, I believe, 25 weeks. It used to be 50. They cut it down. And after 25 weeks, you can take your card. You can pay the dues and take your card, but you don't have to necessarily. But I think there's like a upper limit of how many EMC weeks you can take. The other people I know who have gone past the EMC route are people who were specialty performers who end up on Broadway because they can do things that your average performer doesn't have the ability to. For example, I had a friend from an acting class who was in SpongeBob SquarePants the musical. And it was his first, as far as I remember, his first big contract in New York City, but he was a semi-professional skateboarder and they needed skateboarders on stage. So that's how he got cast and that's how he got his card.
Oh, there you go. So that's the advice. Come up with some specialty skill or move to a smaller market.
Yeah. or just keep on the grind like I've been doing.
I'm sure it will work out for you because with your experience and you seem definitely like you know what you're doing.
I appreciate that.
Last question. Yeah. Last question. If people want to find you, social media, website, anything like that, where would they
absolutely.
find you?
So my website is CaitlynPiccirillo.com. That's really hard to spell. I apologize. It's CaitlynPiccirillo.com. And for something a little easier, I'm on both Instagram and TikTok as at Caitlyn Pic, CaitlynPicc. And then I do have a secondary Instagram, which I'll start posting on better, at Soprano Next Door. And that is just singing performance videos.
I'll throw the links into the show notes. So if anybody wants to click on them and check you out, they can.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. That was a fascinating talk. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.